Saul Canelo Alvarez is widely regarded as the face of boxing right now, so far recording 23 victorious world title fights in 4 weight classes in 62 professional wins, with 39 big wins by knockout. As the former 5-time undisputed super middleweight world champion, Canelo has one thing on his mind: reclaiming his IBF world title by unifying the world titles against Cuba's William Skull to re-establish his status as the undisputed champion of the world. But he didn't get where he is today without working his way through the ranks of the professional boxing world, climbing his way to the very top in his almost 20-year career. In today's video, we will be taking a deep dive into the boxing career or resume of the acclaimed Mexican world champion Canelo Alvarez. Born on the outskirts of the city of Guadalajara on July 18, 1990, as the youngest of 8 children, 7 of them boys who would all also become professional boxers, Canelo began boxing at the young age of 13 years old, after witnessing one of his older brothers turn professional with success. As an amateur, Canelo would amass an impressive record of 44 wins and just 2 losses, with 12 wins by knockout. In 2004, Canelo would win a silver medal at the Junior Mexican National Championships, and the next year, he became the 2005 Junior Mexican National Boxing Champion at the age of 15 years old. After proving himself on the amateur scene, Canelo would decide to take his talents to the professional game. Shortly before turning professional, Canelo would welcome his daughter Emily Alvarez, born October 12, 2005, into the world. Now, he would be fighting for more than just himself, but his family too. On October 19, 2005, he made his professional debut against Abraham Gonzalez, who was 0-1 at the time, a fighter who would go on to record just 1 victory as a professional in 11 bouts. Canelo would outwork and outpoint his man throughout the first 3 rounds, and would force the referee to wave the fight off after a punishing barrage of blows. After making his pro debut, he would pick up 3 more wins until running into an unexpected roadblock early into his career. On June 17, 2006, in his 5th professional fight, Canelo would match up against Jorge Juarez, who came into the fight with an unflattering professional record of 3 wins and 6 losses, with 1 win by knockout. To everyone's surprise, Juarez would drag Canelo into deep waters and would put up a hard fight. By the end of the fight, the judges were divided in their decisions. One judge scored the fight 39-37 in favor of Alvarez. Another saw the fight the opposite way, with a score of 39-37 in favor of Jorge Juarez. The third and final judge saw the fight as even with a score of 38-38, deeming the fight a split draw, and handing Canelo the first blemish of his professional career. Canelo would take this draw on the chin and work on improving his skills as a boxer. After all, he was still only 15 years old and had a lot to learn. In his first 19 months as a professional, he would knock out 11 of his 13 recorded opponents, all of whom were significantly older. After picking up more wins over various journeymen, Canelo would finally get the chance to challenge for his first title as a professional. On August 31, 2007, in his 15th pro fight, Canelo would challenge Ricardo Cano, who entered the fight with 13 wins, 4 losses, and 3 draws for Cano's Jalisco State welterweight title. The fight would go the full scheduled 12 rounds, with Canelo picking up a wide unanimous decision victory to claim his first title as a professional. After picking up 3 more wins over low-level competition, Canelo would bump into his first true test in his professional career. On April 18, 2008, Canelo would face undefeated fellow countryman Gabriel Martinez, who entered the fight with 17 wins and no losses, with 9 wins by knockout, with the vacant WBA Fedicentro welterweight title on the line. Martinez's professional career had panned out similar to Canelo's at the time, with many wins over low-level journeymen, having faced an opponent who was making his professional debut prior to taking on Canelo. If you were to tell him that he was about to face one of the best to ever lace the gloves up, Martinez may have been more prepared. Canelo would decisively destroy his opponent round by round, and would force Martinez to retire in his corner before seeing the beginning of the 12th round. After picking up the WBA regional title, Canelo would beat another journeyman in a 10-round bout, coming away with a unanimous decision victory before his next test in his pro career, facing a familiar foe. Going all the way back to January 20th, 2006, in Canelo's third professional bout, Canelo faced Miguel Vasquez, who was making his professional debut. The fight would be a rather close match, with the judges coming away split in their decisions with scores of 40-37 and 39-37 in favor of Canelo. But the third judge saw the fight the other way, scoring it 39-37 in favor of Vasquez. 2.5 years on from the defeat, and Vasquez had amassed a professional record of 21 wins and just 2 defeats, with 10 wins by knockout, having gone on an 18-fight win streak before dropping a unanimous decision to well-known American boxer Timothy Bradley for Bradley's WBC Youth Super Lightweight World title. On June 28, 2008, Canelo and Vasquez would meet for the second time in their respective careers in Canelo's 21st pro fight, with Vasquez itching to remedy one of the blemishes on his record. Unfortunately for Vasquez, that opportunity would never come, and Canelo would cruise his way to a decisive unanimous decision victory over Vasquez, clearing up any doubts as to who was the better man in the ring anyone may have had after their first encounter. Canelo fought alongside all 6 of his brothers on this card, with the brothers going a collective 4-3, with his brother Rigoberto picking up the Mexican super middleweight title. 3 of his brothers would make their professional debuts, and unfortunately, lost all of them. After his loss to Canelo, Miguel Vasquez would go on to claim the IBF welterweight world title, with 6 successful title defenses before being dethroned by American Mickey Bay. Coming off of the win over Vasquez, Canelo would take home 3 more wins over higher-quality opponents, becoming the first man to stop Colombian champion Raul Pinzon, who came into the fight with 16 wins and just 1 loss, which was a majority decision that came at the hands of undefeated Dominican champion Yuri Gonzalez. Canelo would then get the biggest opportunity of his professional career at the time, when in his 25th professional fight, he would face Luis Antonio Fitch, who entered the fight with a pro record of 12 wins and just 1 loss, with an impressive 10 wins by knockout. Fitch had recently claimed the vacant WBC Youth Lightweight World title. The 2 young men would get the opportunity to fight for one of the most important regional titles in North America, with the then vacant North American Boxing Federation welterweight title on the line. Canelo would prove to the boxing world that he truly was the next big thing, coming on incredibly strong, stopping Fitch just 1 minute and 52 seconds into the very first round, after a devastating barrage of punches forced the referee to swoop in and save Fitch from going unconscious. Over the next 2 years, Canelo would pick up wins over fellow contenders and acquire multiple notable regional titles, picking up a win over Argentinian former world champion Carlos Manuel Baldemir in the process, before finally getting a chance at his first world title at just 20 years old. On March 5, 2011, in his 37th pro fight against Britain's Matthew Hatton, brother of famous former world champion Ricky the Hitman Hatton, who entered the fight with a pro record of 41 wins, 4 losses, and 2 draws with 16 wins by knockout, and was the current EBU European welterweight champion and former IBF Intercontinental and International champion, as well as a former British regional area champion. The fight would be for the then vacant WBC Super Welterweight World title, and Canelo was more determined than he had ever been with the world title within his grasp. He would outwork and outpoint Hatton all night, showing he was truly the better man inside the ring. In the 7th round, after breaking from a hold initiated by Hatton, Canelo would connect with a right hand out of frustration that saw Hatton walk off and take a knee. though this would not be counted as a knockdown, and instead, Canelo would be deducted a point for hitting after the break. The same thing would occur in the 10th round, with Canelo exploding out of the clinch with a left uppercut that would once again send Hatton to the canvas, but again would not be counted as a knockdown. Canelo was not deducted a point this time, and the two men would ultimately finish the 12-round match, with Canelo winning every single round on the judges' scorecards, with the 7th round being unanimously scored as a 9-9 round. Canelo was now the newly crowned WBC super middleweight world champion at just 20 years old, and was ready to take on the world. Just 3 months later, in his first defense of his newly acquired world title, Canelo would match up against another decorated British champion and former world title challenger in the likes of Ryan Rhodes, who entered the fight with a professional record of 45 wins and 4 losses, with 31 big wins by knockout. As mentioned, Rhodes was a multiple-time British BBBFC champion, as well as a 2-time EBU European champion, and had previously unsuccessfully challenged for the WBO super welterweight world title twice, dropping a decision to Jamaican-born Brit Otis Grant in 1997 and losing by KO to Jason Matthews in 1999. Now, over 10 years on from those losses, Rhodes was just itching to get his hands on world title gold for the first time in his career. The two men would meet on June 18, 2011, and would go to war. In the 4th round, Canelo would find a clean shot and connect with a right hand behind the ear that sent Rhodes to the canvas. Rhodes popped to his feet to meet the count and would bravely continue the match. In the 12th and final round, Canelo would put it on early and force the referee to intervene and save Rhodes before taking any further damage. After the Rhodes fight, Canelo would successfully defend his world title another 4 times, with wins over former world champions American Sugar Shane Mosley and Puerto Rican Kermit Cintron. Canelo would decide it was time to take a step up in competition and would sign for the biggest fight of his career thus far. In Canelo's 43rd pro fight, he would face undefeated American Austin Trout, who entered the fight with a clean record of 26 wins and no losses or draws, with 14 wins by knockout. At the time, Trout held the WBA regular super welterweight world title and was coming off of 4 successful title defenses. Trout had also previously acquired multiple regional titles, including the WBA International and WBC Continental Americas titles. The two men would meet in the ring on April 20, 2013, and the fight would be for Canelo's WBC world title and Trout's WBA world title, with the vacant Ring Magazine super middleweight title also on the line. Canelo and Trout would go at it from the opening bell, with both men absolutely determined to stay undefeated as a professional. In the beginning of the 7th round, Canelo would land a clean, straight right hand on the chin of Trout that would give him chicken legs and send him to the canvas. After suffering the first knockdown of Trout's pro career, he would rise to his feet and meet the count, and would battle it out until the final bell. When the scorecards were read, Canelo had come away with a unanimous decision victory, with scores of 118 to 109, 116 to 111, and 115 to 112. Trout would unsuccessfully challenge for multiple world titles following the Canelo bout, and would eventually take his talents to the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, where he is currently the BKFC welterweight world champion, coming off of 2 successful title defenses. Canelo had now overcome the biggest test of his career thus far, and was now the newly unified super middleweight champion. Following the bout with Trout, Canelo would sign for an even bigger and better opponent in his very next fight, against a legendary, undefeated American. In his 44th professional match, Canelo would face Floyd "Money" Mayweather, who entered the fight with an impressive pro record of 44 wins and no losses, with 26 big wins by knockout. This would by far be Canelo's biggest test in his boxing career, and the young Mexican champion knew it would not be anywhere near an easy fight. On September 14, 2013, The two undefeated world champions would come face-to-face, prepared to throw down for Mayweather's WBA Super World title and Canelo's WBC World title, as well as his newly claimed Ring Magazine title. Though unfortunately for Canelo, this fight would not go his way. By the end of the 12-round battle, Mayweather had outlanded Canelo by twice as many punches and would take home scores of 117 to 111 and 116 to 112. Though puzzlingly, the third judge had scored the fight even at 114 to 114. A draw, with Mayweather being awarded a majority decision victory. This fight would serve as a massive learning opportunity for Canelo, who would go on to improve his defensive techniques, picking up some moves from the American who handed him his first pro defeat. Mayweather would of course go on to finish his legendary professional career undefeated with 50 wins and no losses or draws. After suffering his first defeat as a professional, Canelo would return to the ring 6 months later and pick up a 10th-round stoppage victory over former interim WBO super welterweight world champion Alfredo Angulo, with Canelo having dominated the fight up until the stoppage. Having now regained his confidence, Canelo was ready to get back to his dominant winning ways, and in his 46th pro fight, he would accept a fight against Cuban rising star Erislandy Lara. Lara was coming off of a 2-fight win streak that saw him pick up the then-vacant interim WBA light middleweight title, with wins over the aforementioned Angulo and Austin Trout, though his title would not be on the line against Canelo. On July 12, 2014, the two men would meet in the ring and would scrap from the opening round on. While many may have assumed this would be yet another easy masterclass from Canelo, they would have assumed incorrectly, as Lara would give Canelo one of the toughest fights in his career. While Canelo struggled with Lara's 1-2 combinations, Lara relied heavily on his clean punching, defense, and movement, and Canelo's effective aggressiveness and power punching would ultimately be too much for the Cuban, but only in the eyes of 2 of the judges. When the scorecards were announced, 2 judges saw the fight 115 to 113 and 117 to 111 for Alvarez, while the third judge scored the fight 115 to 113 in favor of Lara, with Canelo ultimately coming away with the split decision victory. After knocking out WBC Continental America's super welterweight champion James Kirkland in the 3rd round, Canelo would earn the opportunity to challenge for another world title, and eager to start his 2nd reign, he would sign to fight Puerto Rican legend Miguel Cotto for his 48th professional match for the then-vacant WBC middleweight world title and Ring Magazine title. Cotto entered the fight with a record of 40-4 losses, with an impressive 33 wins by KO, and was the former WBO super lightweight and middleweight world champion, as well as a former WBC welterweight world champion who had a long list victories over notable names and had mainly only lost to top-quality opponents like Floyd Mayweather Jr., Manny Pacquiao, and Austin Trout, and also held a controversial loss to infamous Mexican boxing cheat Antonio Margarito, who he would defeat in a rematch. On November 21, 2015, the two men would clash in a classic tale of the long-standing boxing rivalry between their 2 home countries, Puerto Rico and Mexico, an intense rivalry that has spanned decades, with numerous high-profile matches between fighters from both nations. The fight would go the full scheduled 12 rounds, and was a close fight throughout the match as both boxers were cautious in their attacks, while neither fighter was seriously in trouble at any point in the match. But Canelo ultimately had outworked and outpointed Cotto, and when the final bell rang, Canelo had earned himself a unanimous decision victory with scores of 119 to 109, 118 to 110, and 117 to 111. Once again, Canelo was a world champion and had no intentions of letting go of his crown anytime soon. In between matches, Canelo would welcome his second daughter, Mia Alvarez, into the world born January 2, 2016. Now fighting for even more, you can bet Canelo would come into his next fight hitting harder than ever. In his 49th professional fight, Canelo would defend his newly claimed WBC and ring titles against well-known British boxing star Amir Khan, who entered the fight with a record of 31 wins and 3 losses, with 19 wins by knockout. Khan was the former IBF super lightweight world champion and was the former multiple-time British Commonwealth champion, and had also claimed a bronze medal for Britain at the 2004 Athens Olympic Games. Though Khan had proven in his career that while he could deliver quite the punch, he was also susceptible to getting laid out, with 2 of his 3 losses coming by stoppage to at the time undefeated Bryce Prescott and American boxing star Danny Garcia, with Khan also dropping a split decision to Lamont Peterson in his first defense of his world title. Canelo would meet the decorated British champion in the ring on May 7, 2016. The two men would go at it from the very beginning, both landing clean, powerful blows throughout the match. That is, up until the 6th round, when Canelo landed one of the most devastating punches of his career, a flush overhand right, that knocked Khan clean out cold. Khan had been up on one of the judges' scorecards at the time, but that did not matter as the 25-year-old Mexican champion had handed him his 4th loss as a professional in brutal fashion. After taking out one British champion, Canelo would decide to go after another by jumping back up to super welterweight and challenging Liam "Beefy" Smith for his WBO world title. Smith came into the fight clean as a professional with 23 wins, no losses, and 1 draw with 13 wins by knockout. While he was the current WBO world champion, he had also claimed various British regional titles, as well as a WBA Continental and WBO Intercontinental title in his career, and was not going to give up his world title and undefeated record easily. September 17, 2016. Canelo and Smith would meet in the ring, and unfortunately for Smith, he would largely have nothing for Canelo, who would have his way and control the fight. In the 7th round, Smith would taste the canvas after Canelo landed a beautiful 3-punch combination that ended with a right hook that would rattle the Brit badly. Bravely, Smith would rise to his feet to continue the fight, though it would be for naught, as in the 9th round, another brutal left hook to the body would send Smith to the canvas, with the ref waving the count after seeing the state Smith was in. This would not be the last Canelo would see of the Smith brothers, but more on that later. After decimating Liam Smith, Canelo would take home a unanimous decision victory over Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., son of the legend with the same name with no world titles on the line, before putting his undefeated record on the line against another undefeated opponent in another one of the biggest fights of his career. In his 52nd professional fight, Canelo would drop back down to middleweight and challenge undefeated Kazakh boxing legend Triple G Golovkin for Golovkin's WBC, WBA Super, and IBF middleweight world titles, with Canelo's Ring Magazine title also on the line. Golovkin was the longtime reigning middleweight world champion and entered the fight with a clean record of 37 wins and no losses or draws, with a stunning 33 wins by knockout. Triple G had reigned over the middleweight division for almost 7 years, with notable knockout wins over Kell Brook, David Lemieux, and Dominic Wade, and had been busy unifying the middleweight division over the last 2 years. Golovkin was also an incredibly decorated amateur, with a widely reported record of 345 wins and 5 losses, winning a plethora of gold medals, and notably taking home a silver medal for Kazakhstan at the 2004 Athens Olympics Games. Canelo and Golovkin would meet in the ring on September 16, 2017, and would go to war. The fight was razor close from the very beginning, and by the end, many fans knew the scorecards would likely be close. As the final scorecards were announced, Canelo would likely begin to worry he was about to suffer the second loss of his career, as the first judge saw the fight as 115 to 113 in favor of Golovkin. The second judge, even at 114 to 114. But, to many's confusion, the third and final judge would score the fight a wide 118 to 110 in favor of Alvarez, thus deeming the fight a split draw. The third judge would be widely ridiculed following the bout, and would leave a sour taste in the mouths of boxing fans around the world, who wanted a true winner to be crowned. But the fate of the rematch would be put in jeopardy on March 5, 2018, when Alvarez failed 2 random urine tests collected on February 17th and 20th for the banned substance clenbuterol, which is considered a performance-enhancing drug and is prohibited by the World Anti-Doping Agency, which governs anti-doping rules for Olympic and professional sports, including boxing. Canelo was alongside several other notable Mexican boxers who tested positive for the substance, including Luis Neri, Francisco Vargas, Ray Vargas, and Julio Cesar Martinez. Alvarez was slapped with a 6-month suspension by the Nevada Athletic Commission, and since suspensions are retroactive from the date that the first failed test was collected, which would be February 17th, the suspension ended on August 17th, 2018. And so, 1 month later, and 1 year on from their first bout, the pair would meet again, on September 15th, 2018. Once again, the two would be a perfect match for one another, and would go another 12 rounds, with the fight mainly coming down to the final championship rounds, where the two warriors would slug it out. Canelo notably utilized his body attacks during the match, which may have given him the edge. The final decision was razor close, with Canelo taking home scores of 115 to 113 on 2 cards, while the third judge saw the fight 114 to 114, a draw, meaning Canelo would ultimately take home the majority decision victory, finally dethroning the long-reigning Kazakh world champion. Canelo would decide to jump back up to super middleweight, stopping Rocky Fielding in the 3rd round for Fielding's recently acquired WBA regular super middleweight world title. After the pit stop at super middleweight, Canelo would jump back down to middleweight to defend his world titles and get to work unifying the division. In Canelo's 55th professional fight, he would face current IBF middleweight world champion American Daniel Jacobs, who entered the fight with a pro record of 35 wins and 2 losses, with a stunning 29 wins by knockout. At the time, Jacobs had only lost to the aforementioned Triple G Gennady Golovkin and to undefeated Russian world champion Dmitry Pirog, and was eager to accept the opportunity to unify the middleweight division against the Mexican world champion. Canelo and Jacobs would meet in the ring on May 4, 2019, and would go to work from the opening bell. While many may have predicted that this would be an easy fight for Canelo, that night Jacobs came to fight, and had his moments throughout. Unfortunately for Jacobs, Canelo's more accurate shots and superior defensive work kept him in control of the action. When the final bell rang, the scorecards were read out, and Canelo had taken home a unanimous decision victory with close scores of 115 to 113 from the first 2 judges, and 116 to 112 from the final judge. Now the newly unified middleweight world champion, Canelo's next decision would be quite the surprise to the boxing world, as the Mexican legend would decide to jump up to light heavyweight and challenge longtime Russian light heavyweight world champion Sergey Kovalev, who entered the fight with a record of 34 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw, with a stunning 29 wins by knockout. Kovalev had strictly been in the world title picture for the last 6 years and had only dropped losses to the undefeated American world champion Andre Ward 2 times, and to then undefeated Colombian Eleider Alvarez, who he defeated in a rematch. The Russian legend had unified the light heavyweight WBA, IBF, and WBO world titles before dropping those 2 fights to Ward, but had since regained his title and was ready to defend his crown against the eager Alvarez. The 2 men would meet on November 2, 2019, and would have a rather competitive match, with Kovalev finding success with his jab, while Canelo mainly looked to land big power punches. Up until the 11th round, it would have been tough to call who was leading in the fight. That was until Canelo would land a left hook, straight right combination that would stop the Russian in his tracks, knocking him out cold. Canelo had now claimed world titles in 3 weight divisions, joining the ranks of legendary Hall of Fame boxers. After stamping his name in boxing history, Canelo would decide to jump back down to super middleweight, this time with a clear goal in mind: unify the division to become undisputed world champion. The first stop in this quest would require Canelo to take on another undefeated Smith brother, this time facing Callum Smith, who entered the fight with a clean professional record of 27 wins with no losses, or draws with 19 wins by knockout. Smith had recently won the World Boxing Super Series super middleweight tournament, with decision wins over then undefeated Swede Erik Skoglund and Dutch kickboxing legend Nicky Holtzken, who had recently made the switch to boxing. Smith capped off the tournament by knocking out fellow Brit George Groves in the 7th round, also claiming the WBA Super World title and the Ring Magazine Super Middleweight titles, which he had already defended twice before bumping into Alvarez. Canelo and Smith would clash on December 19, 2020, in Canelo's 57th fight as a pro, with Smith's WBA and Ring Magazine title on the line, as well as the then-vacant WBC world title. Unfortunately for Smith, like his brother, he would not have anything for Canelo, who controlled the action over 12 rounds, making himself difficult to hit, utilizing his jab and trademark body shots whenever he wanted. At the end of the contest, Canelo had won a wide unanimous decision victory and had completed the first step in unifying the division. After a quick pit stop with a 3rd-round retirement and defense of his world titles against Turkey's Avri Yildirim, Canelo would arrive at the 2nd stop necessary in his quest for undisputed, signing to take on undefeated British loudmouth Billy Joe Saunders, who entered the fight with a clean pro record of 30 wins and no losses or draws, with 14 wins by knockout. Saunders was the proud holder of the WBO super middleweight world title and was previously the WBO middleweight champion, as well as a decorated European and British champion. The 2 men would meet in the ring on May 8, 2021, and would have a rather close match for the first 7 rounds, most scoring the early rounds in favor of Canelo, while the middle rounds mostly went to Saunders. That is, up until the 8th round, when Canelo would connect with a huge uppercut that reportedly caused a right orbital fracture that would leave Saunders unable to return to the fight from his corner, earning Canelo the victory by retirement. One step closer to becoming undisputed, Canelo was more determined than ever to see his plan through, and would eventually sign a fight that would be the 3rd and final stop in his quest for the 4 recognized world titles. In Canelo's 60th pro fight, he would take on IBF world champion undefeated American Caleb Plant, who entered the fight with a clean record of 21 wins with no losses or draws, with 12 wins by knockout. Plant had picked up the IBF world title almost 3 years ago and had made 3 successful defenses before getting his shot at undisputed against the Mexican legend. Canelo and Plant would go to war on November 6, 2021. Plant would utilize his feints and rely heavily on his jab and smooth footwork to stay out of harm's way for the first few rounds. But eventually, Canelo's relentless pressure and trademark shots to the body would break down the undefeated American. In the 11th round, Canelo would score a left hook followed by a right uppercut that sent Plant to the canvas. On shaky legs, Plant would beat the count, but was subsequently set upon by Alvarez, forcing the referee to wave the fight off. Finally, Canelo had achieved his greatest feat in boxing by acquiring all 4 world titles and unifying the super middleweight division. He would join a very short list of boxers to achieve undisputed status. In the 4-belt era, joining names like Terence "Bud" Crawford, Alexander Usyk, and Claressa Shields. Instead of defending his world titles, Canelo would put the division on hold in another venture up to light heavyweight, challenging another longtime Russian champion, then undefeated Dmitry Bivol, who entered the fight with a clean record of 19 wins, with no losses or draws, with 11 wins by knockout. Bivol was the longtime reigning WBA light heavyweight world champion, having held some version of the WBA world title for 7 years, and was not going to back down without a fight. The two men would meet on May 7, 2022, with Bivol's WBA title on the line. Canelo was eager to reclaim world title gold at light heavyweight, but unfortunately for him, this feat would be easier said than done. Bivol would bring the fight from the opening bell and controlled Canelo using his size to his advantage, as well as utilizing his jab to keep Alvarez at range. Canelo wouldn't go down without a fight, though, and would score multiple rounds on the judges' cards. But by the end of the 12 rounds, all 3 judges had scored the bout 115 to 113 in favor of Dmitry Bivol, with the final 3 rounds going to Bivol on all 3 judges' cards, sealing his victory. The undefeated Russian champion had handed Canelo his 2nd professional loss, joining legendary company, and would go on to unify the light heavyweight division against Artur Beterbiev in a pair of matches that saw Bivol taste defeat for the first time in the first match, while coming back strong and taking home the undisputed titles in the second match. This fight would leave Canelo determined to hone his skills even more, become even better, and especially would leave the Mexican determined to come back even stronger than before. In his return to the ring, and in his 62nd fight as a pro, Canelo would face a former opponent to resolve some unfinished business. Boxing fans had been left with a sour taste once again following the second match, wanting a clearer decision over who was the better man in the ring. Triple G had been busy down at middleweight picking up the IBF and WBA world titles, and was ready to make his last attempt at defeating the Mexican legend. The match would be an undisputed super middleweight world title defense for Alvarez, and would take place on September 17, 2022. Alvarez, fueled with a desire to get back in the winning column following his second defeat, would come into the fight with a fire in him. The fight would prove most lopsided, with a masterclass tactical performance from Canelo, who had easily controlled the majority of the rounds. Canelo would finally take home a clear-cut unanimous decision victory over the Kazakh champion, with scores of 116 to 112 and 115 to 113 twice. Once again, the judges' scorecards created controversy, but this time, many believed the judges had been too favorable for Golovkin. Still on top of the world at super middleweight, Canelo would make a defense of his undisputed crown against John Ryder, yet another Englishman. Ryder would have nothing for Canelo, getting dropped to the canvas in the 5th round, and outworked the rest of the night en route to a unanimous decision victory for Canelo. His next match would come against longtime super welterweight world champion American Jermell Charlo, twin brother to Jermall Charlo, who was a decorated world champion in his own right. Jermell Charlo would enter the match with a pro record of 35 wins, 1 defeat, and 1 draw, with 19 wins by knockout. On September 30, 2023, the two men would meet in the ring for Canelo's 64th fight, and would be yet another one-sided beating from Alvarez, with Charlo being schooled throughout the fight. In the 7th round, a right hook and right uppercut from Canelo would send Charlo to the canvas, just the 2nd time that Charlo had been knocked down in his pro career. By the end of the match, It was crystal clear who the winner was, with Canelo taking home scores of 119 to 108 and 118 to 109 twice over. Canelo had now defended his status as super middleweight world champion 2 times now and was determined to stay on top. His next 2 fights would be against younger, undefeated fighters who were looking to make their name in the boxing world. He would take home a unanimous decision victory over Jaime Munguia, who was undefeated at 43-0 before the fight, sending Munguia to the canvas in the 4th round in an undisputed world title defense in his 65th pro match. Then, before taking on undefeated Puerto Rican fighter Edgar Berlanga, who was 22-0 before the match in Canelo's 66th and most recent match, the IBF would strip Canelo of his world title for not defending against his mandatory William Skull. The fight would still be a unified super middleweight world title match, with the rest of Canelo's world titles on the line, and Canelo would take home a wide unanimous decision victory over Berlanga, having floored the young Puerto Rican in the 3rd round. After defeating Berlanga, a fight with Terence "Bud" Crawford had been teased but would not come to fruition, and instead, Canelo would set his eyes upon the undisputed title yet again, and would sign to take on Cuban IBF world champion William Skull this Saturday on May 3, 2025. Now remembering all the way back to the last time Canelo matched up against a Cuban fighter, Canelo had quite the tough match in his 46th match against Erislandy Lara, taking home a razor-close split decision. Many are saying to not count Skull out against the Mexican champion, as he may pose a bigger threat than realized at face value. Will Canelo reclaim his status as undisputed world champion? Or will William Skull have what it takes to join elite company and hand Canelo his 3rd loss as a professional? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Well, that has been the resume check of the incredibly well-decorated Mexican world champion Canelo Alvarez. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to see more of my content.